Hi there, listener. My name is Calvin Norman, and you're listening to seedpod, a podcast about forests and natural areas hosted by three scientists and managers. So, before we get started with our episode today, let's just have our other hosts introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm John. I am a forester and I have terrible internet right now.
And I'm AJ. I'm a wildlife biologist, and my internet is actually working for once.
All right, and I'm Calvin, and my internet's fine, but I have a cat in my lap. All right, so before we get into the podcast, we have to do our fun disclaimer. Everything in this podcast is strictly the opinions of the host and does not reflect that of our employers. Also, please do not try to find our employers. Okay, so today our topic is forests. What is a forest? We're going to do this is a really long topic, and honestly, this whole podcast and our careers are really exploration of what is a forest and what makes up a forest. So we're going to try to get into that. But before we get into what is a forest, we have our Forest Minute, where we check in, where the hosts check in with each other and talk about, fun experiences that they had in the woods. So, John, what was your Forest Minute for this week?
So I live in the Midwest of the United States in an area that's really affected by removal of rangelands. And for the first time in the 6 years I've been working on this property, I saw a pheasant, not just heard, but I have actually seen a ring-necked pheasant. Now, pheasants are invasive species, I guess, or naturalized species. They're a really gorgeous-looking game bird. They're kind of really cool indicators of like there's some amount of prairie and grasslands around, and that's kind of what I've been doing for the past 3 years is doubling and doubling the amount of native prairies in this area. So it's just really cool to saw it. It was just running along the side of the road because I think they're not that bright of birds, but yeah, no, it was really cool to see. Finally.
That's really fun.
I've been here. I heard it last year. Around this time, doing its horrifying call.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, I actually saw it in person, so it was really cool.
That's really fun. It's always great to have some success especially on these long-term projects.
That's really funny because I never would have thought about like pheasants being an indicator for positive change.
Yeah.
I always thought of them as like they're ditch parrots. They're out there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how far we've fallen down the line in Iowa. Is like just hey, there's something. This is a species that needs part of its life cycle to have access to grasslands, and it can't be just prairie. It has to be tall grass that it can hide in and cover in. And there's enough that at least one has found its way here and is trying to find a mate and possibly found a mate last year. So it's something, it's something.
Yeah.
We'll take it.
Yeah. So we have pheasants in Pennsylvania, but we do not have enough open habitat to support them, and so and they're all cage release birds, and you can actually measure their survival in hours.
Yeah,
Jesus
the only ones we have are ones that are released from tower shoots, which are a whole stupid thing that we can talk about some other time.
Yeah, it's a different episode. Okay, AJ, what is your Forest Minute?
So my cool one was this is I guess not this past week, but the week before because we're on a 2 week thing. I'm cheating a little bit. We had a big push to get a bunch of burning done on one of our properties that I help manage, and it had a lot of people coming from all over the state, a lot of crews, a lot of different people, and a lot of them were pretty new to the game, to the natural resources game, and call came over the radio. There's a snake under my ATV. What do I do? And come back. Well, what kind is it? I don't know. One of the scary ones. And I go over there. And it was just this absolutely gorgeous canebrake rattler. Really, really cool looking, really pretty. He was not happy to be photographed. But it was just a cool moment. Like he just, was just chilling. Kate decided to, scooch his way out of the burn unit before we started, getting it too spicy for him. And that crew got to see something they hadn't seen before.
That's awesome.
Always a fun experience.
Good call on the snakes part to get out of there. I did a bird once, and we accidentally. Oh, sorry, John, you go.
Oh no, I was gonna say we saw the garter snake fuck pile on a south facing slope, just a whole mass of them, just all writhing and getting warm. And probably having sex if
Yes.
snakes have sex. But like, yeah, it was, and I'm terrified of snakes. That's the one thing I don't fuck with is snakes.
Oh,
So
you'd fit right in down here.
I respect them. I'm terrified of them. I don't want to kill them. I just want them to be away from me.
That's fair. I once we did a burn. And I was doing follow up to the burn, and we accidentally burned up an eastern diamondback. It was like a good size, like a 4 footer. So that was sad.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it happens. It happens.
It happens.
So my forest minute for today is on Friday. We planted this small farm field. It was a pasture that had been pasture and part of a forest that had been sold off. And so the new owner didn't want it to be, like a very unproductive pasture. So we planted it to forest. And as part of the planting took like 13 hours of just slamming trees in the ground. And we had to get them all in the ground. Otherwise, they were probably going to die sitting in their boxes. And that would be an issue because it was expensive and hard to get all the seedlings. And also, we don't want baby trees to die. So we had to get them all on the ground. And we were joking about because there were a bunch of meadowlarks and bluebirds that had come to site, and so I was joking with one of my colleagues that we're kicking all these guys out of their homes, and then my colleague was like, "No, look, this is great because when we plant the trees, we also have to put tree tubes over them, which is these large protective structures to keep voles and moles and deer and rabbits away from the baby trees." And so he was like, no, this is great perching habitat for the bluebirds. And like 2 minutes after he said that, a pair of bluebirds came like down out of nowhere and landed on the one of the tree tubes we had just put in and just started singing at each other. And it was really nice.
I don't want to be too much of a negative Nancy, but did you put bird nets over top?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay,
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because the first year I planted with those tree tubes, and I found a songbird dead at the bottom.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
was just
Yeah.
like,
No.
no.
No. No.
Yeah,
No.
so,
No.
okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Good,
No.
good, good, good.
No. 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 We're not just slamming bird death traps out there. Yeah. Oh yeah. Um.
Uh, so I saw you guys used weed mats out there. Is that like
Yeah.
standard practice, or is that just...
No, that was
Okay,
NRCS that we had to
good.
do it because we were planting an
Really?
old
Okay.
pasture. They wanted us
Mm-hmm.
to plant weed mats. So weed mats are these like construction garden
It's landscape
fabric, and
fabric.
it's landscape fabric, and it keeps the helps the trees compete at small size with all of the grasses and stuff that were in the pasture, and they required it. I would rather not have used the weed mats because I have to get on the ground like
Yeah.
over 1,000 times and then pound these pins into the ground to hold the weed mats down. And also, I got to buy more stuff and I'm putting more plastic on the landscape. So I would rather not have used them, but NRCS said, you're using them. So we said, all right, boss, we're using the weed mats. So that was the weed mat.
Yeah.
That's what it was with the weed mats. I think that we would have been
No, I
probably,
just haven't seen them yet.
yeah. Yeah. I would have given my druthers. I would have just like sprayed like oust around the seedlings. Like I would put them in the ground, come back in a couple of days, and sprayed oust around them. But NRCS said weed mats, so is weed mats.
Weird.
It is what it is. Okay, so that was our first segment. So now into our second segment. Now this is at the suggestion of AJ. So this is the invasive of the episode. We're going to talk about one invasive species at the start of the episode. This is not going to be the end all be all when it comes to invasive species. We're just gonna introduce it. So just as an we haven't done our invasive species episode that will be coming up. So just as an introduction to the topic, invasive species are non-native species that are able to reproduce in an area, propagate themselves for at least 10 years, and do damage to ecosystems, human uses, cultural uses, or social and or economic uses of an area. I'm going to be honest. The definition only looks at the damages to human use. The one that's most commonly used. I added the ecological damage because I think that is the most important part about invasive species. I don't particularly like the human and economic centered definition. I like to focus on the ecology. So these would be species that are obviously non-native to an area, that change the soil chemistry, damage plants, damage, lots of other things. They cause all kinds of damage. We're going to do a whole episode on invasive species, so this is just an introduction to the idea. So our invasive species for the episode is, John, you're going to love this one, tree of heaven.
Oh
The
God.
scientific name is Ailanthus altissima. So Ailanthus altissima, tree of heaven. It's native to Eastern Asia. It is called tree of heaven because it's one of the tallest trees in its native habitat, and it grows very fast. So it's reaching towards the heavens. Hence the name tree of heaven. It has been imported into the United States a couple of times. There are at least 4 known introductions. 3 on the East Coast, 1 on the East Coast, or sorry, 1 on the West Coast, and the you can find it in every landscape in like Eastern North America and parts of Western North America.
And oh no, it was in Western North America
Yep.
too, because in the high desert of Colorado, I found it.
Oh yes,
A
I had
place that gets maybe 30 centimeters of rain. Like it gets not a lot of rain, and I found it there.
yeah. It's an incredibly flexible plant. I have found this tree everywhere from Venice to Sacramento. All over the place. Lots of people have made the mistake of unfortunately introducing the species, and it's really damaging to ecosystems. But it was introduced as an ornamental species, usually as an urban tree, because it grows really fast. It's tolerant of basically every single site, and then there are a couple of ornamental varieties. One that's common in the eastern United States that has a red petiole, so the thing that the leaf attaches to is bright red, and that was one of the varieties that was first introduced because people liked the red petiole. I don't know. So it's very easy to identify. It has it has a compound leaf, so you have multiple leaflets per leaf. The longest leaf that I've seen of Tree of Heaven was about 6 feet long. Um,
Shit.
yeah, and it has very stout twigs. They're basically sticks because the leaf is so long. It doesn't need to have, delicate twigs. It does not really have visible buds. Very easy to identify by the smell. The tree smells much like rotting peanut butter. It's got a stank to it. It's got a
Yeah,
stank. I have
yeah, it's real bad.
Yeah.
you can smell it, particularly if you break the stem. But even on leaves, you can really get that rotten peanut buttery smell to it. I have run into a few
Yep.
people who
It's
like the
what
smell.
Those people are wrong.
That's
Yeah,
bizarre.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a crazy thing to
No, my
like.
favorite way to do tree ID is like use all of your senses without using tasting,
Oh, yeah.
unless you're absolutely sure you know what it is. But like, yeah, use all of your senses. Don't just use your eyes. Don't just focus on the leaves. Like that's one of the things that I always tell people who are just learning tree IDs is use all of them. The good Lord gave them all to you.
Yep.
So
Oh yeah, and it's tree of heaven. So another thing that's very helpful in identifying plants is site. A lot of trees, we're going to talk about this in a little bit. They have a preferred site, a preferred place that they want to be. Tree of heaven will grow everywhere. It will grow everywhere. I'm talking mountaintop to ridgetop to out of the cracks in the sidewalk.
Yep.
So its site is anything that has soil and even places that don't have soil. What makes it such a pain to control is that it is very fecund, so it produces a large number of seeds that tend to be very fertile. It is a dioecious plant, so you would think that helps. So dioecious means 2 houses, so that there is a one plant that produces the seeds and one plant that produces the pollen. Some people refer to that as male and female. We're going to save that conversation for a later episode, but suffice it to say is don't do that. That's a really not great way to talk about plants. So it doesn't really respect the unique and individuality of each plant species. Plus, like the attempt at making a dichotomy there does where it's an attempt to make a dichotomy where one doesn't exist. You have dioecious plants.
it's a plant. It's a plant, not a human.
Yeah.
They're very different things, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, it really annoys us, but we'll talk about that later. So it's a dioecious plant, so you can find it producing samara, so those are winged fruits in the fall, and the fruit-producing trees produce a large number of seeds that can fly for quite a long ways. Additionally, what makes it really difficult to control is that it's a vigorous stump sprouter. So when people think of plants, they think of the above ground part, like the green stem, as the alive part. In Tree of Heaven, it's really the root system that kind of drives that plant. If you attack that above ground part, so if you just cut the tree down, that root system responds by throwing up, so many more seedlings. So it can't be controlled through mechanical means, so cutting. You can pull very small ones, but you have to kill it chemically. My preferred way to kill it is on small ones to spray the leaves with glyphosate and triclopyr, and then on larger trees to hack and squirt them with triclopyr. John, how do you like to kill a tree of heaven?
So this is a really fun one for me. I actually haven't had to do it that much.
Oh,
in Iowa
fantastic!
right now. Yeah, yeah. So it's the little victories. But typically they don't. I haven't run into any that can't be just handled with a basil bark treatment.
Nice.
So it's triclopyr. It's the kind of utility knife that we have for a lot of invasive treatments. So that would be how I'd kind of do my first one. If it actually works, I'm assuming it works. But yeah.
Oh yeah.
I haven't run into anything big enough. Just wandering around the city that I live in, like I haven't found any that are big enough to warrant a hack and squirt on it. I would just run up to it, basil park it, and run away. Because there's one on this walk down to the hill that I live on down to downtown, and it's just staring at me. And one of these days, I'm gonna get it.
Good, do it.
But yeah, I just need to do some trespassing at 2 a.m.
No,
we
wouldn't admit to crimes. These are legally legally killing
never.
plants.
Yeah.
AJ, what are your interactions with Tree of Heaven?
Oh, thankfully not much recently. We don't have a ton of it in this part of the state. They're more up north. But I did plenty of killing it when I was out in California. It was all over the place out there. My favorite one that I saw it sprouting in a basement, like a foot. Like this is a 3-4 foot tall, unfinished basement, dirt floor and all. But like
so inside the basement.
The basement, this fucking thing was growing. It was I was like, oh, okay, this is some bad shit here.
I've seen it growing, to good size out of gutters, but never in a basement. That's a good one.
Yeah.
The biggest tree of heaven
Jesus.
that I've killed was approximately 26 inches in diameter.
God.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's a straight up log.
Oh yeah. We grow them pretty good out here. We grow them pretty good, for better and for much worse. We did a control.
Did you cut that down?
No. I just hack and squirted it, and then I walked away from it.
Because I wonder. I'm thinking of like when you cut a lot of hardwoods down, like there's all the sap runs out, you get all the water pouring out of it, and I'm wondering if the smell of cutting down a 26-inch tree of heaven would just be so bad.
Well, now you gotta do a test, Calvin. You gotta go
take one for the team.
No, it was on a 30-degree slope, man. That was not a fun job. That was not on a fun job.
That's fine. That builds character.
We have a lot of it in the Mid-Atlantic. I've killed whole stands of Tree of Heaven. There's one job that we have to finish this summer where it's like 17 acres of Tree of Heaven control. And we're going to actually leave the sweet birch, which is a native tree that can be occasionally problematic, but we're going to leave the sweet birch behind because it's our only regeneration. The stand is like 70% Tree of Heaven, and then the other 30% is sweet birch with 5% miscellaneous species. It's not a fun place. That job also has a lot of issues with ground nesting wasps.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, it's a really not fun job. But they don't pay me to do fun jobs, If it was a nice place, they wouldn't hire me to do it. I work on bad stands.
Seriously, though.
Okay, so let's jump into the meat of the episode. So our topic today is, what is a forest? So this is going to be a really simple and easy question to answer, and I have estimated that this is going to take us roughly 5 minutes to answer. Now, listener, just a little thing for you. So the thinking sand may lie to you. It may tell you, your phone or your listening device may tell you that this episode runs to an hour and a half in length. And just know that that's the thinking sand lying to you. It only took us 5 minutes to introduce the concepts of forests and to kind of just start to, get into forests a little bit to you. So that's my warning for you, listener. We're going to try to keep things short here, but John and I have kind of dedicated our lives to these things. And for better and for worse, AJ has to deal with forests as well. So we kind of have
a good way to put that.
We have a lot of thoughts about this, so it's going to take us a second here. But today's just going to be an introduction, and again, most of the rest of this podcast is going to be exploring a lot of what we're going to introduce today. And there's a lot of nuance and everything, that we're going to say. and everything we're going to talk about, there's a lot of nuance. So, just for fun, let's come up with our own definition of forest. So, John, because you have spent a lot of time thinking about learning about forests, you get to go first. John, how do you define a forest? What is a forest to you?
Okay. Area dominated, an area roughly more than 2 acres dominated by trees is the easiest answer I would give.
Okay.
And trees not specifically grown for like fruit production, so not like a citrus orchard,
Ooh,
like an
okay.
orange orchard or something like that, or apple orchard.
Okay.
That's the quickest definition I can come up with.
Okay. AJ, your turn. How do you define a forest?
Oh man. Okay, so definitely an area dominated by trees. I'll stick with that. But I'm a wildlife guy, so I have to go that route. A forest is an ecosystem, and in order to be a functional unit of an ecosystem, you have to define what species you're talking about that actually cares about it. So, a 1 acre, air quotes, forest is not actually a forest for a grizzly bear because they need more space than that. So I would argue that the definition of a forest is a little bit more fluid than that, from at least from an ecology standpoint.
Yeah,
From a legal and a land use standpoint, sure, I'll area dominated by trees. Bing bang
Okay.
boom.
All right, I like all that. So I have the notes, so I'm going to read my definition. I got to think a little bit more about it. But you guys could have looked at the notes. I wrote them 2 hours ahead of time. Okay, so a forest to me is a place defined by trees. I don't think it has to be dominated by trees necessarily. I just want it to be defined by trees. So I would call a savanna, like an oak savanna, I would call that a forest. Even though you have a number of trees that are widely spaced out, you still have trees there, and they're a key function of the ecosystem in the area. Because if you didn't have trees, it would just be a plain. So that's why I'm going to say
It'd be a
dominated.
prairie.
Yeah, prairie.
And I would agree with that too, just because
Yeah.
they are what make the whole system unique.
Yeah.
I think,
So.
and I'm trying to. I wish I'd thought about this ahead of time and found the old reference. There was something I read once that kind of split. This is all forest, right? But we can split it into several subcategories, and you've got savanna and woodland, and then capital F forest, let's call it, and it was all broken down based on essentially the amount of canopy cover. So like a capital F forest would be like 100% to 80% canopy cover. A woodland would be 80% to, I don't know, maybe it was 40% or 30%, and then a savanna would be 30% and down, but it still obviously had to have trees as an important part of that land unit.
Yep. So that's 30. It's 10 to 30,
10 to 30
is
okay.
oak savanna. Yeah, 10 to 30 is oak savanna. 30 to 60 is oak woodland, and you can divide that up into closed canopy and open canopy. And then everything higher than that is forest, and everything lower than that is prairie that just happens to have a tree.
Is that specifically an oak woodland savanna? Like, is that specifically an oak,
All right,
centric
That's
we're
where I've
gonna
seen it
division?
most
we're gonna
referenced.
bring this
Yeah.
back. We're gonna bring this back. So we're getting a little bit. This is a broad definition. So that's my broad definition. Is it's defined by trees. But obviously we can pick apart the nuances in there because it's the fun thing about natural resources. There's always nuance. The other thing that I need to put into my definition of forest is that these trees are non-agricultural. So much like John, I would not consider an orchard a forest. I would. This is my hot take here. Like a red pine plantation, not really a forest to me. Not that much. It's a plantation. This is an agricultural thing. So
Okay, yeah, that was gonna be my next question.
How many?
yeah,
Loblolly
so
planted
how many
it not.
species is that break point?
how many? What I would say, was it intentionally established for solely commercial things? So
Okay, that's where I disagree because
Yeah.
if you start adding enough species and
Yeah.
diversity, and you have shrubs.
Yeah, but what's the main
try to make
objective?
it as holistic. Yeah,
yeah,
we're gonna get. I have lots of thoughts about that because that's how we established a lot of forest out here in Iowa. It's like cleared everything, and now we're coming back 200 years later and planting trees.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we're planting trees for commercial use, but also we're trying to cram as much wildlife and benefit in there as well.
Well-
It just so happens.
well, hold
that,
on, hold
I
on.
also got to grow some veneers.
hold on, John. We're about to get interesting with this. So let's hold on to the
Okay.
commercial side. So I said non-agriculture. Here I'm meaning non-food agriculture, because I'm about to get up into this for a second here. So the U.S. Forest Service, which is this is me pulling at the Oxford Dictionary. So the U.S. Forest Service says that a forest is 1 acre of land that is at least 10% covered by live trees. And those trees can be artificially and naturally established or generated. So how do we feel about the Forest Service definition of a forest?
I mean, by that definition,
So
my backyard
fun.
is a forest, and no, it is not.
Okay.
uh, I I feel okay with it. I mean, it's pretty broad.
Yeah,
Eh,
but I think that our definitions that we
yeah,
came up with were pretty close. So yeah, I'm okay with it. I don't hate it.
yeah,
What?
yeah. No, I've
Honestly, it's
heard
the
worse.
size. 1 acre is
Yeah.
so small. It
Yep.
is
Yeah,
so small.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's too small to be a functional unit of an ecosystem for
Yep.
most species. It's far too small. Far too small to be a useful size from any kind of like commercial or even agricultural standpoint. The size is the thing that gets me, I think.
Yeah. This is definitely a
Badumts.
land cover definition. Oh, like okay. You know what? That's the response that one deserves. So it's definitely a land cover definition. Okay, so that's what the Forest Service says is a forest. Now, let's go back. We were kind of talking about one thing I wanted to discuss here, which was the agricultural side of things. So I pulled ag out, and here I mean food ag. So the reason I'm pulling that out is because in the U.S. Forestry is considered agriculture. It was defined as agriculture by Gifford Pinchot and Teddy Roosevelt in the early 1900s because that was the framework that they had to approach this. How do we feel about forests and forestry as agriculture?
I don't like it.
I don't either.
It's not great.
I don't think I like it either. I,
It needs yeah, it's tough because it's not. There almost needs to be a secret third thing, right?
That's very much an option. And if you look abroad, if you look at other countries, you just have a Ministry of Forestry, a Department of Forestry. So I think that there is a secret third thing, which is it's just a different thing.
I mean, well, and honestly, think about at the state level. The vast majority of states do not put their Department of Forestry or their Forestry Commission or whatever. They're not part of the state Department of Agriculture. Typically, they're usually their own thing.
Yep.
But
or DNR.
or they're all just under DNR.
It's Department of Natural Resources.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I have so many conflicting thoughts and feelings about agriculture in general that like it doesn't. I know it doesn't fit in there, but I also like. I think we all three of us know the historical context of where it came
Well,
from.
let's
and the
discuss
roots
that
of
real quick.
forestry and stuff
Let's
like
discuss that historical context real quick. So we won't make this a Gifford Pinchot episode. That's a different episode. But let's just put some context to it.
I'm just going to start like why forestry exists is because like in the 1800s and before that, the everything was made out of wood, and there was very real and scientific and rough mathematical evidence that there was going to be a timber famine if we didn't start managing our forests. And previously, they discovered forests in Europe discovered forests in Latvia and the Baltics that could be exploited, and then they found the forests in North America that could be exploited, and then the Midwest that could be, and then so on and so forth. And then by the time they, Western, European dominated nations got to the end of the North American continent, there's a very real fear that they were going to run out of wood. And again, wood, literally everything was made out of wood. I cannot underestimate that, as much as possible. And so like doing forestry was the best way to get out of it. And so you had to grow it like a crop because we had to get the wood out in order to try and get as much, barrels for moving stuff around out of the forest as possible. So like that's the very, very, very quick definition of it, and like it makes sense. But the world has moved on since then. We've discovered the glory of petrochemicals. Everything is plastics now, including me. And so it doesn't really. And we've also evolved with our definitions and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
it doesn't quite meet it.
we're actually practicing forestry now. So forestry is the art and science of managing forests. We're not doing pure, unadulterated extractions of just like clear cutting hundreds and thousands of acres of land or not necessarily clear cutting, but just like high grading. So you take the best forest and leave the rest. So that's I appreciate you bringing that in, and like the context is really important here because it was developed with this extraction mindset. The Gifford Pinchot would tell you that multiple use is the key. He just didn't have ecology, and he didn't have a way to think of forests outside of agriculture. But he also wanted to preserve the management and the conservation side of forestry without falling into the John Muir's school of, just preservation, which is a completely different episode. So preservation versus conservation. The short version of this discussion is preservation is keep everything exactly as it is, where conservation is we can use these landscapes and we can get things out of them, and we can try to conserve things.
We can use them smartly.
Yeah. And so that means management sometimes, and sometimes no management. It means killing invasive species and sometimes harvesting trees. Where preservation is this thing must look exactly like it does at this one point in time whenever you're setting up your preservation.
Your snapshot of time, which is not even valid.
Yeah, no, it's not a good system. So that's why it was put into the Department of Agriculture rather than Interior, and rather than like a preservation mindset. But I'm right here for like should be its own thing. It's a much longer time scale, and the things that are impacted, when you're managing and thinking about forests are usually much broader than like agriculture. Not to say that there aren't living things and like birds and stuff that use agricultural settings, but like when we're managing when we're managing forests, like we can manage for like grouse production and timber production. Like we could do like all kinds of stuff. So that's why I'm all here for it's different. But
I will say I think our southeastern pine plantations get about as close as you can get to pure agriculture.
For sure.
In a air quotes again forest setting, because I'd argue that most of those are not actually forests, but that's as close as it gets.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So, quick question: how fast can you turn over a loblolly plantation?
There's some that are like 15 years.
I saw a 7-year rotation outside of Savannah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They've got the like crazy stuff. They use that for the like engineered what they call it, like the engineered wood fiber, where they form it into the beams and whatever. Like you cannot use it for anything other than that because like the rings are like a freaking half-inch apart.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. It's loblolly that grows like
it's corn.
Yeah.
It's slightly long-lived corn.
It's
perennial corn. Yeah.
Genetically engineered.
I've got hay plantations that last longer in the Midwest than that does. Holy cow.
Yeah, I mean, so that's why I'm like, it's different than like traditional agriculture. I think it should be its secret third thing. So I mean, I'm glad that we had that fun little discussion. Okay, so we've now functionally for this podcast and for the rest of this discussion, the rest of this podcast, we've defined what forest and forestry is. We've come down semi-agreeing. I think we could say we semi-agree with Gifford Pinchot in that we're conservationists, not preservationists, but we disagree with the GIF in some other things. But he also was a man of his time. Not to say, well, we're going to have a much longer conversation about the GIF later.
Oh, yeah.
There are some other unsavory things about him that we'll hang on for that conversation. But like,
we'll continue to say he was a man of his time and to not spoil it further.
Yeah. A lot of fun things to talk about with the GIF. But given the constraints, I understand why he made the choice. He was wrong, and we should go back and change where forestry sits. Is I think let's to sum up our discussion here. Okay, so all right, now this is about trees. So what is a tree, AJ? What is a tree to you? Define for me a tree.
It's a woody plant that I don't know. Is a runner oak a tree? Because it's not tall.
What the hell's a runner oak?
It's a freaking oak that it grows like 1 foot off the ground, and it's ground. It's what if oak was ground cover? It's weird. It's weird. So I don't know. Is a runner oak a tree, Calvin? I don't know.
That's where we're making our definition now.
Yeah.
Man. The future is now.
Woody plant. It's upright, and has a single stem. I'll say that, a single main stem, typically.
Okay. Okay. I like some of these things.
I'm
John,
gonna
what is
keep
tree
qualifying
to you?
stuff though, so I can back
Yeah.
out. You know.
It's
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
It's okay. We're making up a definition, John. What is a tree? When I say a tree, what is a tree?
A tree is a woody plant that can grow, I think, like what, 6 inches or something like that in diameter, and taller than 10 feet.
Okay. Hey, that's
I think
pretty close to the Forest
No,
Service
that-
definition.
Forest Service definition.
I've given a talk where I've had to try and catch college kids and just ask them what's a tree.
Yeah.
And just like try to bully them into giving me a definition.
Yeah. So I use the Forest Service definition. I don't believe in this like, whoa, words don't mean anything. No, I think words have very much a meaning. So I like the woody plant. It's got to be a perennial woody plant. Has to
Perennial. Yeah.
And so this is on ideal conditions. It can achieve at least 3 inches in diameter, and have a root collar. So that's where you transition from roots to stem of at least 5 inches, and then it has to reach over 16 feet tall. I would say 20 feet tall. If you're asking me, I'd say you're a tree after 30 feet. On an ideal site, because below 30 feet you're a shrub, above 30 feet you're a tree. The Forest Service says 16.4 feet because that's 5 meters. But I'm
I was gonna say that's also a log.
yeah, that's true. That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. So a log for our non-forestry professionals out there. The standard historic log was 16 feet long. However, it can't be 16 feet exactly because you have to cut it off. So you have a foot at the base, and so really it's 16, 17 and a half feet, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So 16 and a half feet is a log. And the Forest Service is, again, an agency founded in the idea of conservation and management with utilization at the heart. So that makes sense that they would have 16.4 feet in there if that's utilization. But I like their definition because it kicks vines out, because it has to be, they say, an erect plant, so it has to go upright. Vines aren't upright. Your runner oak, if it's running along the ground, it doesn't go up. Not a tree, that's a shrub. And it keeps our shrubs out. Also, it keeps out silly stuff like bamboo. People try to call that a tree. No, that's not woody. Doesn't make diameter. So I'm kicking it out. I'm also kicking out, in my personal definition of a tree, palms. Those are grasses.
Yep.
Palm trees are grasses.
So a bamboo, forest, or is that a forest or is that a grassland?
It's not 100% bamboo. There's a mix of species in there, so you're probably still getting to forest.
I just had a cat terrorist knock over my mic and try to eat my cable, so I may be in and out trying to fend him off. Hi, buddy.
Fair.
Yeah. Sorry. Bamboo is a grass. I would say it's a grassland, mostly to be argumentative.
Yeah, I like that. But I would also say that in a bamboo forest, not that I've seen a true natural bamboo forest, I've only seen bamboo invading natural stands here in the eastern United States. In a bamboo stand, you have other trees mixed in it. It's not 100% bamboo.
I bet you could find an acre that's just bamboo, though.
Yeah, well now we're talking grassland, baby. I'm falling back to John here. This is the grassland now. We don't have a forest.
Yeah, it's a prairie.
It's a prairie.
It's a bamboo prairie.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's cursed.
No, that's definitionally correct. You're definitionally correct. And I'm kicking palms out as well because it's not woody tissue. It's from a botanical standpoint, it's a little bit different. Also, the other thing that annoys me about palms, which kicks them out from the tree category for me, is they grow differently than trees do. Palms add layers on top, whereas trees grow out from the center. They have a central pith, and palms, the apical meristem is on top. And so, you can see really funky growth in palm trees based on, what kind of a year it had. Because if it had a really bad year one year, that growth ring is going to be really tight on top, and then it could have a really interesting hourglass shape because really bad year and then 4 good years and then a really bad year and then 4 good years, where you don't really see that in trees. So that's why I'm kicking palms out. Also, they just annoy me.
They annoy you?
They're loud as shit. Whenever you try to walk through a palm,
Oh, yeah.
a palmetto, oh my god.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, no, walking through them sucks, but
Oh yeah, they annoy me, so they don't get to be trees. And the things that I love are trees. Yeah,
King Calvin,
yeah,
no palms.
yeah. Look, we're making the definition now, so that's why I'm kicking the palms out. Okay, okay. So we have now for the rest of the podcast, we have defined what trees are, what a forest are, and what forestry is. Don't worry, listener. We will do a similar episode about wildlife management where AJ we will be coming up with similar definitions and talking us through the history of wildlife management. So this is not the only thing we're going to do this for. We just want to introduce everyone to what we're talking about and have good terms for a future discussion. So that's the basics of what a tree is, what a forest is. Let's kind of move on here. So how much forest do you guys think that we have currently in the world?
I've
no idea.
Yeah, no, couldn't guess.
I can't use that. That's a number too big.
Okay, how about just in the U.S.? How many acres of forest do we have in the U.S.?
I literally could not tell you.
We have roughly 818 million acres of forest land in the United States. The percent cover, how much land does forest cover in the U.S., is a little over a third, roughly 36% of the U.S. is forested. And so that's again in our definition.
I could have told you percent, but just like saying like, oh yeah, it's that many million of acres. Like my brain stops after like a couple hundred.
Yeah. So the forest cover worldwide, we're looking at almost 10 billion acres of land is forest. So the specific number is 4 billion acres or 4 billion hectares or 9.8 billion acres, because it's like 2.42 acres to the hectare. Yeah, so that we have a lot of forest land in the world currently, and it stretches. It's all over the place from Tierra del Fuego up into Alaska. Basically, if land is not too cold and it's not too dry, you're gonna have trees. Trees are really good at being most places. They've been around for like 400 million years. So they've gotten most places and have figured out most things. They're wonderful, awesome beings, and I think that I could speak for all of us here when I say we just absolutely love them. Like, we've discussed, like, I dream about trees and I talk about trees in my sleep. Like, wonderful things. We're going to really get into some of the cool niche things about trees, but I'm just going to introduce, we have two main kinds of trees. We have gymnosperms and angiosperms. Our gymnosperms, those are mostly what people think of as our conifers, so spruce, pine, fir, cedar, redwoods. All those are gymnosperms, meaning naked seeds, so they don't produce a fruit. Instead, they have a cone or a cone-like structure of some kind that varies, especially once you get into Cupressaceae. Those are our weird conifers.
Quick question, Calvin.
Yes, sir.
Are ginkgos gymnosperms?
I think that they're angiosperms. Oh, they are a gymnosperm. They are a gymnosperm. You're right.
Yeah, I thought they were. They're weird.
Yeah, 200.
They're weird. Yeah.
Yeah, because the angiosperms evolved like 200 million years ago. These are 290 million years old. So yeah. So there's when we say naked seed, it doesn't mean that there's not like a fruit-like thing, something that looks like to the general idea like a fruit, like a juniper berry. It's not actually a berry; it's an aril, so it's a cone, like it's a fleshy cone. Technically, it's not a fruit, though it looks like a fruit. So we're talking. So in the extreme areas, we see our gymnosperms dominate because they actually have their vascular structure makes them better operating in the extremes, whereas our angiosperms, so those are seeds, or those are trees plants that produce fruit, so they don't have naked seeds. They have stuff over their seeds. Those do better in our temperate areas. So if you're, in Europe, Europe is an area where you have a lot more gymnosperm domination. But like the United States tends to be angiosperm dominated until you get to the west. The southeast has a lot of planted conifers, but it's a lot of angiosperm.
I mean, they also had a lot of conifers too.
Yeah. Even before widespread planting, it was still dominated by gymnosperms.
Yeah, well, no,
like
you're
roughly...
thinking forest, but like plant 80% of all the plants in the world
Oh,
are
yeah. No, you just
angiosperms.
mean like just the plant life
Yes.
overall. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So the broad diversity of plant life in the world today is in angiosperms, and that's because there are some. Again, we're not going to get super botanical in this episode. We're just going to touch on things, but they're the
This is us not
flexibility.
getting super botanical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great.
Which is scary for everyone involved.
There are some flexibilities that are allowed in being a flowering plant that allow you to evolve into wider niches and to have a little bit more flexibility in there. So that's why 80% of plant species are angiosperms, even though they've been around for 200 million years less. However, 200 million years is a long time, so you can evolve to be pretty diverse in 200 million years. The other big differences are gymnosperms have just tracheas as their vascular system, whereas angiosperms also have, I wrote it down, they also have vessel cells. And so that allows them to transport water and other fluids, across their, I almost said bodies, across the plant more efficiently. And so that's why they do better in temperate zones, where the gymnosperms do better in more extremes.
So basically, angiosperms are more. They've got two sets of pipes basically for the uninitiated that allows them to move more stuff more quickly.
Yeah, that's
my understanding.
that's
right?
perfect.
Okay.
That's more stuff more quickly
And
and
then
more efficiently. But because you have two
Okay.
sets of pipes, they are more likely to break in the cold.
Okay, so it is cold and not just heat.
Oh, it's
or-
it's a lot of stressors, but I was
Oh,
using
it's just-
cold. You're right. That's a great point. I
Oh,
was using
okay,
cold
okay.
in this context. They're more likely to break. So cold,
Gotcha,
heat
okay.
stress, drought stress, you're going to do better
Gotcha.
with just tracheas. And the other thing that can be useful in extreme settings is if you're a gymnosperm, you're not using as much water because you don't have the water like efficiency in this case. I mean efficiency, speed, and rapidity of movement that an angiosperm has because you have a slightly less efficient vascular system. So the vascular system is how plants move water. Plants, you can just think of them as basically big, straws. They operate on a pressure differential, so they pull water nutrients out from the ground, and they made it out to their leaves. And if you're in a drought-stressed area or you're in an area that's got a lot of freeze-thaw, like being really great at moving liquid around is not always advantageous because like you need a lot of water. Whereas if you're not so great at moving water, it's okay if you're less efficient. You're not moving as much water because there's, just less of it. So
So, question on that. So, is the fact that needles are actually leaves for everyone listening? They do the exact same thing. So, the fact that needles are roughly smaller, do they have more surface area or less surface area? Does that play any interaction in this?
depends on the plant, and there's a lot of things that trees can do, plants can do in the leaves to govern, like water use. Like they can open and close their stomatas. We can get into the different kinds of photosynthesis, but I'm going to hold off on all of that. But
Okay,
there are a lot of ways that plants can try to moderate that, water efficiency outside of their cells. But this is just roughly why,
Gotcha.
you're going to see more angiosperms in the temperates versus conifers in the extremes. So extremes again being both cold and temperature and climate, all kinds of things are the extreme in this case. Okay.
Okay, so question another. So
Yeah.
I'm just shooting questions now.
Go.
What do you need for a? I'm just gonna say tree, but assume any sort of plant. So what do you need for a tree to grow? Like the common ones I get when I ask this question is air, and water and sunlight. Is that it, or is there something else we?
Oh,
can add
John,
to
that's a
it?
great question. You're getting exactly to where we want to go. You're getting exactly
Oh,
to where
shit,
we want to go.
okay.
Perfect. Perfect. So what plants require to grow are exactly that. They need air, they need water, they need usually soil, though there are some plants that are pretty good at getting along without soil or with less soil than you would expect, like mangroves and our bald cypress. That's just great with like a lot less, soil than you would expect or hope.
Mm-hmm.
And they need carbon dioxide. So remember, plants photosynthesize, so they don't breathe air. They produce oxygen as a byproduct. Actually, at one point in time, they had actually poisoned the atmosphere because they were producing so much CO2 that it was, the atmosphere changed from being a CO2 dominated to being oxygen dominated, and then plants were running out of CO2 to use until salvaging, or no, what's the right, not salvaging, um, degrading bacteria evolved the capability to break down lignin,
Oh, yeah.
and that's when oxygen started being used again and kind of helped balance the atmosphere out. They were so efficient for so long they almost kind of killed themselves, but that's a different story for a different time. So they need CO2, air, water, the right amount of water, not too much, not too little, and sunlight, and also nutrients. The amount of nutrients varies depending on the nutrient in the plant, but we'll get into micro and macronutrients later. Every plant is evolved for its specific desires in that order of things. Some plants want a lot of sunlight, so we call those shade intolerant plants because they need a lot of sunlight to be effective, and they've evolved for like to take advantage of a lot of sunlight. Some plants don't want a lot of sunlight. We call those shade tolerant because they tolerate shade. It can be, being in full sunlight can.
It's a spectrum.
Yeah.
I say it's a spectrum on multiple levels where it's like
sunlight, moisture level, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like especially for like light levels, like it varies based on like where you are in a species range. Like out here on the western side of the white oak range, what we found is our white oaks are extra intolerant or just a little bit more intolerant of shade compared to more eastern varieties. Like, so we have to give them more light when they're getting started just to kind of kick them in the pants to get them to grow a little bit faster.
Is that a function of like just the shortened growing season, you think?
I have literally no idea. This is all anecdotal really. It's just kind of foresters talking about silviculture and just kind of saying, hey, I tried a traditional shelter wood where you left, a shelter wood being a roughly evenly distributed amount of shade across the entire forest area to try and grow oaks. But it never took, and like the trees that, according to every however many hundreds of pages of literature would say, yeah, you could wait 10 years, 15 years, you'll get a 10 foot tall oak and you can proceed with removing the other trees. And it never works out here. We don't know why, and we don't have enough academic researchers to do it, and it's really tough to do it on private land. So it's just kind of a lot of best guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just this really fun niche, I guess, or feature, or I don't know what, bug.
Well, that's something I like to tell my students all the time is the trees don't read the books. So we think about and talk about plants in, our human-focused ideas, but like they don't always work that way. So, just because we think that they're evolved for these conditions, I mean they are. So like our invasive plants, a lot of those like in their native range are shade intolerant. Like Japanese stiltgrass, which is an invasive plant here in the mid-Atlantic, is shade intolerant in Japan. However,
seriously,
I can show it. Oh yeah,
I only ever see it in shaded areas.
Yeah, well, I mean the books say it's shade intolerant. I guess I don't. I've never seen it in Japan, so I don't know. I'm just telling what the book says. Yeah, but like in North America, I can show it to you growing in full sunlight and in deep shade. I can show it to you growing in hemlock forests, which are like the darkest forests I can find here. So. These niches.
Yeah, I always see it in, like thick bottoms, and drains and stuff that are fully shaded. Like that's where it's the worst.
Are you sure that's not wavy leaf basket grass?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's still grass. Yeah.
Okay, just checking because they look pretty similar.
I don't know that we have the other. I don't know that we have that here. Actually.
Oh, I've found basket grass near Savannah. So.
Okay. Well,
and in Congaree. Yeah, that's a different conversation.
Yeah, we'll dig into that.
Yeah, that's a fun. You could get a first report on wavy leaf. So wavy leaf is supposed to be the other way around. It's supposed to be shade tolerant, not preferring full sunlight. But this is a spectrum. This is a spectrum of things that plants like, and we just have to remember and appreciate that. And so the other thing about plants is, just because they're not all friends. Forests are a place of competition, is how we need to remember forests. They are always defined by some kind of competition, be that competition for nutrients underground, be that competition for sunlight, or be it water. The competition varies place to place. So if you're in the rainforest, your biggest competition is sunlight and nutrients. You have a lot of really fast-growing plants. You've got a ton of water, but you know the soils of the tropics tend to be very poor because the nutrients wash out. So you're racing to find those nutrients. Whereas like in temperate forests, my competition is for light. If you go up to the boreal forest, there again you're looking at a lot of nutrient competition. I saw in Latvia, the foresters were telling us they have to do a lot of blueberry suppression because at young stages blueberries really reduce tree growth because of that competition in the first layers of the soil for nutrients. So it's always competition. It's always competition that drive a forest. What the plants are competing for completely depends on the plants and the forests. But that's one of the big things we want to be remembering in these systems is there's competition happening at all levels and they're always changing. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say. Oh, I was just going to give another example for like competition for water is the Western United States, the high desert ecosystems around like Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, like those areas. All that's water based. It's a lesser extent sunlight, but just the sheer amount of water. And as we were talking about how trees are pumps and stuff like that actually becomes a really important topic, especially when it comes to drought stress.
Okay. So the next, I got two things we can talk about next. I'll let you guys drive the boat here. Do we want to talk about disturbance, or do we want to talk about layers in a forest and what makes up a forest?
Oh well, Calvin, you have something here labeled succession.
Well, that goes along with the disturbance.
That's disturbance.
That's disturbance.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You know what?
No,
I think let's do disturbance and succession first because
Okay.
we're gonna get to the layers.
Okay.
Through that,
Okay.
I think.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Wonderful. I love both of these things. That's why I had to ask. I just need some direction sometime. So we have, and again, this is going to be a whole series of episodes and explorations, and there's exceptions to rules that we're going to discuss because, again, plants don't read the book. They don't know what they're supposed to do, and they don't know that they don't know what they're supposed to do. So we have an idea. It's called succession. So succession is the ongoing process in changing of plant communities and thereby wildlife communities. So you have primary succession and secondary succession. We'll leave that discussion for later. For most forests, they have already undergone primary succession or into secondary succession. So what happens is you have what we call a disturbance. So you have a windstorm comes through and blows down all the trees. You have a wildfire. You have a hurricane. We pave, we cut down the forest and we put up a Walmart, and then the Walmart gets knocked over, and now I got an open field again. So these are all disturbance. Disturbance can be natural, it can be large scale, and it can be small scale. Forests are always undergoing disturbance because that's just how natural areas are. There's always something happening. It's not always happening at a level that we can see or think about. For example, you can have lightning strike a tree, knock it down, and okay, that was a small disturbance. But if you're not counting every single tree in a 100-acre forest, you don't notice that disturbance. So you're always having that disturbance ongoing. Secondary succession, which we're going to think about, is the process of going from a field to a closed canopy forest. So this is assuming that you can grow trees in an area, which for a lot of places is a good assumption, and for not a lot of places it's not true. Or sorry, for places it's not true. If you can't grow trees, it's going to be a grassland, and then you'll have changes in the plant community there, but it's not really dramatic succession. It's just a little bit different. So for places that can grow trees, you start with an open field and it has an assorted grass community and forbs. Forbs are non-grassy, non-sedge plants, so flowers and blueberries and
wildflowers is a good way to think about it.
Your clovers, all that kind of stuff. These are all
forbs. I used the term forbs in front of a landowner that I was working with one time, and he was, "What's a forb?" And I was like, had to stop and just think, what's the best way to describe this? And I was like, a forb is a good weed.
A weed.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Those would be forbs as well. The weed would be a forb. It's a big forb, but it's
weed
a forb.
the plant. Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
That's a weed.
Yeah. Yeah. So you go from this grass community, and then it starts to fill in with these forbs. As the forbs fill in, slowly you get your shade intolerant trees start to come in. So again, thinking about my home forest, we get box elder, we get aspen, we get red maple starts to come in, and so that starts to take over, and that puts a little bit. These trees start to put some shade on the ground. They tend to be shorter lived. I'm going to say 10 because there are exceptions, like the redwoods. Like those are an early successional and also late successional shade intolerant tree that don't listen to succession because they're
Yeah,
really interesting
they
trees.
don't care about that at all.
No, yeah, they're both the alpha and the omega in their ecosystem. They don't care what the book says. So
They
that's a
they
later
laugh at
discussion.
our petty attempts to classify them.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then we do climate change to them, and they all die.
Right,
Ha
yeah,
ha
okay.
ha.
So we get
Yeah.
we get the last laugh.
Okay, later conversation. We
Yeah,
have to get back into
Yeah, sorry,
back
we
into
gotta
succession,
Yep.
back into
focus.
disturbance. So we have the community starts to change to become slightly shaded. So then we get our semi-shade tolerant species start to come in. So because we have a canopy now, we can have squirrels running around. They bring in some acorns, and so we now have our semi-shade tolerant trees like oaks and hickories start to show up. As those grow up and start to take over our canopy, they start to shade out our shade intolerant species. So now our aspen is not regenerating. Instead, what we have in the understory is we have now shade tolerant plants. So we have, we went from an aspen forest to an oak forest to a maple forest and then a hickory forest. This is all assuming that no disturbance happens. It takes a couple hundred years. Then you get a hickory, a maple hickory, sorry, a maple beech forest is going to be kind of your like later successional stage, and then you get the old growth successional stage or the maximum or climax forest, and that's going to be like in my forest. It's going to be largely hemlock, white pine, beech forests. However, like what maximum succession is depends on the site as well. Because again, like we were just talking about, trees have things in places they want to grow. So like maximum, like your climax, not the one stage of succession is better than any other stage of succession. So your climax stage is going to be different, like depending on where the forest is. If you can't grow hemlock, your classic successional stage of hemlock, your old growth stage, that can't be hemlock because the trees can't grow there. So your old growth stage may just be some really funky like chestnut oaks. Is one thing it could
So
be.
I mean, so to use an example, out here in Iowa, we have roughly the same forest that Calvin's dealing with, but the main difference is we have we get hotter temperatures, more extreme temperatures, more humidity, and generally less rain. And so what that means is that our climax forest is a maple basswood forest. It is roughly the same thing as the maple basswood beech, but because we get so little extra rain, the beeches can't survive here. They're just too they don't the differential in water is just too much for them to handle. They can handle the heat, but they need that extra water, and we don't get that. Whereas down south, where you're at, AJ, I think you guys still have beaches like up in the mountains and stuff like that,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the main difference there is just sheer volume of water,
Yep.
and we don't have that. So, like our climax species is just maple basswood. Once upon a time, it was also ash, but
Rest in power.
those are all dead.
Rest in power. Well, and also like for AJ, like his climax forest can be longleaf pine. Like that's
Yeah,
a classic
and I was
climax
going to bring
forest.
that up too because our climax forest, all of the talk about shade dominated and plants being like that kind of falls apart because we're in largely savanna country down here, so the light level is much less important than just the I guess mid-story shading you get, and then and just the constant disturbance, which is its own weird. High frequency disturbance is its own different animal than the that kind of makes the traditional way of thinking about secondary succession kind of falls apart.
Yeah, well, so let's
In a
get
lot
into
of
that.
ways.
So let's talk about disturbance regimes for a second here. So every forest has some kind of disturbance that it's evolved with. So in AJ's case, it's largely fire. Be that intentionally set by native peoples and now forest managers, or be that unintentional lightning strikes. So that fire regime is pretty frequent, like 1 to 5 years. Sometimes that's a 10, and they're going to be usually low intensity fire, so it's not burning down the whole forest, but it's coming through and burning a lot of the grass and stuff out. So it's a frequent fire regime, is what that's evolved for. So those plants have all these, have evolved all these characteristics for that disturbance. So that means like, when a fire blows through a longleaf pine forest, like that's fine. Like those plants are usually used to it, and like there's a whole suite of plants that have evolved for fire. There's also a suite of plants that will come in if there's not fire, and both of those plant communities are important to some degree. Depends on the plant and the plant communities when we're thinking about, to some degree more or less, in a matrix, because we also have to remember that like we're talking thousands and thousands of acres of forest, and so like a disturbance can happen on a large scale, like what we saw with those hurricanes this fall, but they also happen, on a small scale, and there's also like things that are not impacted by the large scale disturbance. So we get what we call a matrix of habitat.
Yeah, even let's say you got 1,000 acres, and let's say it's getting burned every 2 years, right? Within that 1,000 acres, you might have patches of 20, 25, 50 here and there scattered around. Maybe the fire doesn't reach them for 6 years or 8 years. Well, in that span of time, and especially down here because shit grows so fast, now you've had almost a little mini succession in that little patch until the fire finally does get in there, and then it resets. But you have that going on all across the landscape at all these different scales, and that's just kind of how that matrix fits together down here.
Yeah, so there's all these matrices, and that's the other really fun thing is like we think of it like as a big overriding thing on a forest scale, but in a landscape you have all like this mix 'em up of stuff. So forests are never like we think of them as like this, like this is just where a bunch of trees are, and like when it changes, like that's kind of a problem, or that's something we should be concerned about. Like that's not always the case. It's good to have disturbance. You have disturbance, like plants and animals that are evolved for disturbed landscapes. Like we know that disturbance is natural and it happens to some extent more or less depending on the forest and the plants in general, because you have wildlife and plants that are evolved for it. Like you have, like again, to pull the ring-tailed pheasant example, like that it doesn't want there to be a forest. If every forest always evolved to just be forest forever, you wouldn't have wildlife that evolves for grasslands.
Yeah, and my my favorite, one of my bugbears about in forestry is like people get understandably attached and very bent out of shape when a tree dies, and I'm not necessarily bent out of shape when a tree dies when it's especially like an old oak tree that's been here literally for 300 years, having survived multiple droughts, multiple terrible grazing practices, multiple invasive pests, like all this stuff. Like this tree is allowed to die. It has lived a full healthy life. What I get stressed out is when like there's no next generation of trees coming up underneath it. And that's a whole other conversation, but like that's where I get bent out of shape, and like people are like, oh, our oaks are dying. It's like our oaks are dying, yes, in my part of Iowa.
Everything
like, oaks
does.
are dying.
Yeah, they're old as shit.
Everything
They're
dies.
supposed to.
Yeah, they're supposed to die. Give them a break, man. But like, you should be more angry and disturbed that there's no young oaks, roughly, 6-10 feet tall coming in underneath. That's what you should be scared about and pissed off about. Like, that's what you should be focusing on, not that this oak that's 400 years old, literally like in human years, 90 frickin' years old, has died. It's always more complicated, and that's one of my favorite bugbears about forestry and the public.
Yeah, well, and that's where we're talking about disturbance right now. So the really fun thing about managing forests is when we manage forests, we attempt to mimic succession and to mimic these natural disturbances to grow forests back and to grow trees back. So like if we were going to manage for oak, we're going to disturb these forests in a way that oak have evolved to succeed in. So we're going to create some light conditions and hopefully burn it, and then we're going to get some more oak back. Where if we're trying to manage for aspen because we want to have grouse, and we're going to cut everything down and we're going to put a lot of light in the ground to try to get aspen back in there. But every forest is different in all of our and how we can manage for these trees and these conditions is different depending on the forest, depending on the landscape, and that's the really fun part to me. That's the super fun part. I just love it. And also, when we think about succession, people think about it at the forest level, so at the tens and hundreds of acres level, where like you can see succession in the foot level. Like if you have like a what we call a canopy gap, so where a large tree has died and opened up, you know, opened up and put light in the ground, you'll see a younger successional suite of plants come in and wildlife come in a more mature forest. And like that's the really cool part to me is like finding like all of the neat and the the neatness and the beauty in nature and how everybody what everything is evolved for and just finding that out there. That's what's really cool to me. So that's the introduction to succession. We're going to do a whole bunch of more talks about succession because as we've kind of alluded to, there's a lot to think about. There's AJ has some hot takes on succession, and I'll allow him to get into in 1 second. But it is. I would like to remind folks like succession is a theoretical model of approaching plants and ecosystems and the relationship between all of those things. Because when the plant community changes, the wildlife community that depends on those plants changes. When you have a shrubland here in the mid-Atlantic, we get golden-winged warbler. And then when that advances into a more mature forest, we get cerulean warbler. So you have to have a shrubland so you can have golden-winged warbler, but you also have to have a mature forest to have cerulean forest. So, this interplay is beautiful to me, and finding that beauty is wonderful to me. So what are our thoughts on succession? John, you want to go first?
So I mean, mine are pretty simple. It's just like it boils down to it's more complicated, and it depends is a classic ecology based answer of like, oh yeah, how does this thing develop? Well, it depends. And I had a professor in school that always tried to get us in saying like, try to get us to say like, hey, it always happens this way. And he would say, no, it doesn't. I'm like, yeah, no shit. It doesn't always happen this way. Like, for lack of a better terms, shit happens. A wildfire rips through. A prescribed fire rips through. You have a logging things. Like, things always throw a wrench in it. And so, yeah, that's my short version. I deal with succession pretty mildly, I'll say, compared to everybody else. Yeah, that's mine. It's more complicated than we give it credit for. Is my summary.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that before I let you go and rip into succession, I do want to point out that there is no, from a completely theoretical approach to the question, there is no one ideal state of succession. Every plant's community and ecosystem is as valuable as the next plant community ecosystem. The lack of one community or another can make it so, like, we need more of one community in the landscape. Like here in the mid-Atlantic, we don't have a lot of early successional habitat, so a lot of our warblers and our migratory birds are struggling. We also lack late successional habitat, so the wildlife that depends on that are struggling. So I think people really get caught up in like, well, we have to have millions and millions of acres of old growth, when we know like in the mid-Atlantic we should have 20% of our forests as early successional forests, 60% as mature forest, and then another 20% as old growth. And like focusing on one style and type of successional stage versus another is like it's killing the warbler. It's killing one warbler to like focus on another. So that's something we need to keep in mind.
I also, like you, I also have some thoughts, some hot takes on old growth forests and how people get bent out of shape about it, especially on the eastern half of the United States.
It's
and
another
also
podcast.
Some other places.
Yeah,
but
it's
a whole other podcast.
thing.
I know.
We'll do the old growth episode later. Yeah, AJ. Let's hear your thoughts.
I'm not gonna go off too much. Like, all right, succession is fine. It's a theoretical construct, that we use to talk about a very complex process, and I just like poking holes in those because I'm cantankerous that way. The thing with succession is, and I think I even said it earlier, like, we talk about the stages of succession, and as it goes forward, and then you get a disturbance that resets or sets back succession. And that, I think, is where a lot of us, natural resources professionals kind of end up stumbling, because you don't really reset succession. If you've got shade dominated forest, if you're at that stage of succession, right, and you clear cut it, you're not back at early successional habitat because all of the species in your understory are what was there when it was shade dominated. You just have a young forest now. And you need to, there's probably some element of like more disturbance that needs to happen, more management that needs to happen to actually get back to, an earlier successional stage, because then you need to have that particular suite of species at ground level and even at mid-story level. And so that's something that I hear people talk about it. I see it all the time. Just reset succession, set it back, and it's not really that simple, and it kind of drives me a little crazy. So I mean that's my one of my bugbears on succession. The other one, and this is partly adopted from my old advisor. This was one of his bugbears too, and I get it. I care a little bit less than he did about it. The term early successional habitat, late successional habitat, all that shit. The idea being habitat for what? What is early successional habitat?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what habitat is for a plant or an animal? It's for some species. Early successional is not a species. It's not, So you have to kind of define what you're talking about if you're gonna talk about, do we have early successional habitat? Well, no. Do you have quail habitat? Do you have butterfly habitat? Do you have tall grass prairie habitat? Now, I don't get nearly as bent out of shape about it because, like I said, it's an important point, but it's not that important. It's a good check, though, to maybe think about what you're actually trying to manage for, rather than just kind of this vaguely defined, I don't know, it's got a lot of grasses, maybe? For us, for natural resources managers, at least, I think it's important to kind of take that extra beat and think about, well, what do we actually mean when we're saying early successional habitat? Like, what's our actual objective? What is the thing that we want more of?
So I will say, you mentioned that, like, what the objective is, and out here it's usually two things. It's deer, because Christ alive, we apparently don't deer. Very loud, incorrect buzzer. And then the other one is, it's an excuse to do forest management, and I use forest management very broadly in here, because so much of our land is in Iowa is neglected, old high grades, or no one, or someone just recently acquired it, and even if a shelter would have some sort for oak to try and grow new oak seedlings was something that is achievable, is the right thing to do, yada yada yada. Some people have just such a tough time wrapping their head around it, that being able to say, oh, this is early successional habitat, just clear cut it, whack it, restack it, replant 300 trees per acre, oak or red oak, walnut, you'll get a forest back in 15 years, it'll be fine. I feel like a lot of what we use that for is just an excuse to do clear cuts, or just even any sort of timber harvest, do any sort of management. Like, it's trying to get by people in, I guess, out here.
Yeah.
And I gotta respect it, because like it's something.
It's something.
It's better than doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an excuse to say, okay, let's address some invasives, and then let's go cut a couple $1,000s of walnut and a couple shitty elms and all that sort of stuff. But like, at the same time, is it the appropriate disturbance as a whole? And the answer, I think, is no. I've seen the appropriate disturbance out here, and it's a mixture of fire and 1 acre clear cut gaps. Like, I lived through derechos out here, and that's what they did. They opened up almost mathematically 1 to 2 acre gaps, and then if there was also previous fires, like, that killed all of our mid-story of shade tolerant trees like ironwood and sugar maple. And like, those are the two disturbances out here that we would use and see a lot of. And so a giant clear cut 20 acres in size or 10 acres in size, maybe not.
Yeah, no, I think these are all fair critiques.
Very funny to me to think of 10 acre clear cut being giant.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome to the farm lot life, man.
No, I
Hey,
hear you.
at least I've got a tree that can literally be $5,000. So,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
suck it.
that's true.
That's true. I had the students out looking at some logs the other day, and the whole load was worth $2,000. Yeah, that trade war, when not good,
Yeah.
not good for log prices.
No.
Okay, so I think this has been a fantastic introduction to the concept of succession, where it goes wrong, how it goes right, etc. So that's just, we want to be thinking about succession. This is a model. It's a model. It's a way to approach natural resources and stuff like that. Because what we also have to remember is that natural resources are just that, they are natural systems that don't respond how humans think. We kind of think about them, and try to plan them, but the best laid plans are, you know,
They
just
absolutely fucking refuse to stay in the boxes
Yeah.
that we draw for them.
Right.
And my favorite thing to tell people is forestry. We are literally building 2x4s, a rectangular object, out of a round freaking tree. We are fitting a round peg in a square hole,
Yeah.
and it's not going to work, man. Like, we could try, but it's not going to work.
Well,
So, like,
yeah.
that's my favorite thing. So, like, it's just not, it's not always going to work perfectly.
Yeah.
It's not an exact science.
Yeah.
That art side of art and science of growing trees is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, my favorite thing to tell folks about forestry is, like, we foresters like to think we can control a lot. Really, all we control is light on the ground for a couple of years. That's all we control. You can mess with soil fertility a little bit with fertilizing and liming and stuff like that. It's very difficult and tends not to be that successful. So you can try that.
And it's pretty short lived.
Yeah, you could try that if you want. You can, you can plant, but it's pretty expensive and it's not always going to be successful. So, mostly you're working with, outside of, again, AJ's southeastern example, mostly you're working with the species that you have on site. That's mostly what I'm working with. If I have white oak on site, I can try to grow white oak, but if I cut all my white oak off site, I'm not growing white oak again. So we're mostly working with the plants that we have on site, the conditions, the abiotic factors, which I forgot to talk about. We'll talk about those in a second. I don't set those at all. The only thing that I control as a person is light. How much light hits the ground for a small amount of time, and what's getting that light. And I control that with herbicides, chainsaws, fire, and also choosing not to do any of that. So that's all we control. That's all we control. Okay, so that was really fun discussion of succession. Again, listener, I know this has been a long 5 minutes, but I told you it's just 5 minutes. That's all this is. It's just been 5 minutes with your good friends. That's all it's been. So let's talk for a quick second about abiotic factors, how those define forests. So abiotic factors are non-living things. So these are going to be rain, soil, water. I would also say in here, stand history. We could have a real fight about whether history is abiotic or a biotic factor. I'm going to just choose to call this largely an abiotic factor because I no longer control what happened in a forest before me. So that's what I'm going to call it for the sake of this discussion, an abiotic factor. So, we're growing trees, yes, but that the kind of trees that we're growing largely, and the amount of trees and the density of trees and how big they can get largely depends on these abiotic factors. Yep, we're going to talk most of this podcast is going to be about plants and wildlife and all that stuff, but it's all downstream of soil, wind, and water. And I'm not a soil scientist, so I'm going to largely ignore the soil side of things, as I think I can confidently say that the rest of us are going to do.
I remember some of the names.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know what my clay soils are and sandy soils, but beyond the fact that they're kind of cool, I don't know. The fact that they have a whole taxonomy, like we have, for genus and species, is flabbergasting to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very important, but at the end of the day, there's only so much information a guy can keep in his head. And so I know a little bit about soils, but we're going to largely ignore soils and say that's just an act of God.
Look, it's just a little too close to chemistry for my taste. So
exactly.
You hang on. Stop trying to rub the mic, buddy. I will say, pushing back on the soils are an act of God. Having seen some of the erosion, no, we've done a lot of that work ourselves. Fair. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Fair. We'll probably at some point talk to a soil scientist about soil and all that kind of stuff. But we're just going to largely ignore soils and say that's kind of a factor of the woods. The woods are downstream of the soils,
Site
and the soils.
characteristics is what
Yeah.
we call that.
Yeah. Okay. That's all right. All right. We're using the real words I see. Yeah. Yeah. The site characteristics. So that's what drives. That's the other thing that drives our forest, as well as stand history. What's been done there in the past. Also very important in the past and the future of the stand. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about before we call this an excellent 5 minutes are the canopy layers. So in most forests, you have usually three canopy layers. Again, I'm going to say most because it varies. If you're in boreal forest, you really only have two canopy layers. If you're in tropical forest, you can have a bunch of canopy layers. But in most temperate forests, you have three canopy layers. So it's your overstory. So those are going to be your big, tall trees. So we've talked a lot about oaks and pines. Those are going to be our overstory trees. Those are usually, 40 to 60 feet plus is going to be our overstory trees. For metric people, I don't know, like 10 meters, I think. Something like that.
Sure.
10 meters plus. For our mid-story, those are going to be the trees and shrubs underneath the overstory, but not at the ground. So I call that, from 10 to 30 feet high, maybe 5 meters.
4.5. I was gonna say 4.5 feet tall to whatever's above
Well, I'll
that.
give you some tall forbs. Little blue stem can get 6-7 feet
Yeah,
tall.
I was gonna say
but
I
it's
feel like
woody.
6 foot is a cutoff I've seen a lot of
Yeah.
time, but you could say 10.
Yeah, I'll take it.
10,
Oh,
10
okay.
to 20 for mid story.
Yeah, I'll take 5. I'll take 6. I'll take 10, somewhere in there. So that's going to be your mid story, and then your understory. Those are things that are on the ground. So these are going to be 0 to 10 feet tall, 0 to 5 feet tall. These are going to be your grasses, your forbs, all that kind of stuff. Those are the main places that plants hang out. There are arboreal plants. Those are plants that live in other like trees, like a lot of orchids are arboreal plants. So they're never touching the ground. They're air plants hanging out up there. Or wait, no, they're not called arboreal plants. It's the E one. Epiphyte. Epiphytes?
Epiphytes, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Arboreal. It does mean in trees, but they call them epiphytes. You're right. So, you can have epiphytes that live in the trees. You can also have your vines, which are like, yeah, man, like, hey, we're like both understory and overstory. Like, I go from 0 to 120 feet tall because I'm a grapevine. I don't need your categorization. So these are just broad categories. We want to think about these categories. They're particularly important when we think about wildlife species because you tend to have, especially when we're thinking about birds, you have birds that like to hang out in one area or another. So like your birds of prey are going to perch in the overstory, hunt in the understory, but they need an overstory to like hang out in.
You get your ground birds, you get your tree birds, you get your air birds, different birds.
Get your water birds, but
Water
again,
birds,
that's not our problem. That's a water problem. So those are our canopy layers. I think this has been as much of an introduction to forests as we can do. The only thing that I did not talk about was regeneration because there's absolutely no way we could get into regeneration right now.
No, we would. That
much
that
too
would be
long
a
of a conversation.
Yeah, that'd be another hour and a half.
Yeah. Yes. So
I think suffice it to say it's new tree seedlings. Moving on.
yes. So, listener, that has been a light introduction to the concept of forests as well as many other things. These are going to be the outlines that we use when we think about forests as a conceptual thing. That there are, as we have discussed, numerous exceptions to these concepts in times where they don't work out that well. So, concepts. These are concepts and ideas. This is theory that we've discussed. Okay, let's do a last call for final thoughts. AJ, do you have any? Oh, we do have. I also want to say we broadly ignored wildlife in this whole discussion because we just wanted to talk about the plant side of things. There's a whole conversation that we're going to have. AJ is going to lead our discussion on introduction to thinking about wildlife and wildlife stuff. But just know that like huge importance there. Like again, when we're thinking about oaks, who plants all of the oaks? Blue jays and squirrels. That's who grows all my oaks. They're the best tree planters money can't buy. So, fantastic conversation that we will have. But again, we're running way over 5 minutes, so we cut it. We cut all the wildlife
An
out.
hour and a half.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So, final thoughts here. AJ, do you have a final thought?
No, nothing. I think we covered it. Looking
Okay.
forward to doing the wildlife talk.
Okay, John, do you have a final thought here for us?
It's always more complex than you think it is.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah,
Just it.
yeah. And we are always discovering that complexity because we are simple human beings trying to understand incredibly complex systems, and it will only ever get more complex as we learn more things and our tools become better and our ability to study things becomes better. But that's a different
Yeah.
podcast. That's a different. I have so many thoughts about E.O. Wilson's initial studies, but that's a different podcast. Old science is so fun, but different podcast. So
It
we'll
is.
push all that back. So, listener, it only remains for me to thank you for listening to our second episode of Seed Pod. I know this has been a wonderful 5 minute walk in the woods with your good buddies here at Seed Pod. So, thank you so much for taking your time, and we look forward to speaking with you in a few weeks' time here.
See you next
Bye.
time.
Bye.